My wife drained my savings after promising loyalty and love, so I filed for divorce and secured every asset, leaving her with crushing regret forever. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and when I married my wife, I genuinely believed that love was supposed to mean trust, loyalty, and partnership, no secrets, no games. We met in our mid-20s, and from the start, everything felt aligned. We dreamed the same dreams, buying a home, saving for the future, and supporting each other through the grind of early careers. She always said I was her rock, praising my stability while insisting she wanted to be independent but grateful for the life we were building together. I believed her. I trusted her fully. From the very beginning, I handed over pieces of our financial life, letting her manage certain bills, showing her our joint savings, and assuming this transparency was a two-way street. I remember one night over dinner, she laughed and said, "I don't know what I'd do without you. You make everything seem possible." Her words warmed me. I felt proud, like I was the backbone of a shared dream, the anchor keeping us steady while the world around us spun with uncertainty. Friends and family constantly commented on how perfect we seemed together. "You guys are goals," my sister said once, sipping her wine. I smiled, secretly grateful that someone noticed the effort I poured into making our lives stable. Even my parents seemed impressed, mentioning that she was so lucky to have someone reliable like me. I started to believe that everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. I would lie in bed at night, thinking about our future, picturing our house, vacations, and the life we promised each other. Every detail felt like a puzzle piece perfectly in place. I felt untouchable, untethered from doubt, convinced that our bond was unbreakable. The idea that someone I loved could betray me in any way seemed impossible. And yet, as I look back, that sense of security was the very thing that made the fall so devastating. At first, the cracks were subtle, almost invisible if you weren't paying close attention. I started noticing little things, small charges on our joint card that didn't make sense, receipts that didn't match the statements, and a few nights when she seemed distracted, texting under the table while pretending to scroll through social media. I asked her about it once, casually, thinking maybe it was nothing. "Oh, that's just some bills I forgot to tell you about," she said with that easy smile that always made me want to believe her. I believed her. Every time. She had this way of twisting my questions into moments where I felt guilty for even asking. "Why are you always checking on me? Don't you trust me?" she'd whisper, eyes wide, leaning close so I could feel the sincerity, or what I thought was sincerity, burning through. I hated that I was starting to feel paranoid, but she made me feel like the bad guy for even noticing. Friends would tell me, "Maybe you're overthinking it," and I clung to that reassurance like a lifeline. I even started joking with myself, muttering under my breath when I saw another unexplained transaction, trying to laugh off the unease. The apartment felt smaller at night, every creak and hum of the heating system making me wonder what was really going on. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one evening, staring at the statements, feeling that familiar twist of doubt creeping into my chest. She came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "Don't worry about it," she said softly, "we're in this together." Her voice was warm, her presence comforting, and I felt that old trust start to knit itself back together. But even as I nodded and let her hug me, a tiny part of my mind whispered, "What if it's not just bills?" That thought was like a shadow I couldn't shake. I tried to push it away, convinced I was overreacting. Yet deep down, I knew something was off, and ignoring it was only going to make what came next hit even harder. The first time I realized it wasn't just minor bills, I felt a cold jolt in my chest that I couldn't shake. I was going through our savings account to check on an upcoming bill when I noticed a massive withdrawal, tens of thousands gone, with no explanation. My hands shook as I scrolled, hoping it was some kind of mistake. I called her immediately, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey. I'm looking at the account. Did you transfer some money somewhere?" I asked, hoping for a simple answer. She laughed lightly, that nervous, airy laugh I once found charming. "Oh, don't worry about it. I just had to cover a few things for work and some personal stuff. It's all temporary, I promise." Her words should have reassured me, but instead, every muscle in my body tightened. The more she spoke, the more I realized her explanation didn't add up. I could feel my trust fraying like a rope under too much weight. Over the next few days, I watched our finances with a mix of fear and disbelief. Late-night notifications, strange charges, and hidden transfers became the new normal. I started noticing patterns, little lies tucked into her stories about work, friends, and errands. "You're imagining things," she said one night, catching me staring at my laptop, frozen over yet another unexplained transfer. But the seed of doubt had already rooted itself deep in my mind. The apartment, once a sanctuary, felt hostile and claustrophobic. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, even the soft creak of the floorboard sounded like warnings I didn't want to hear. Every day I tried to pretend everything was fine, telling myself, maybe it's nothing, maybe she really is just stressed. But the weight of suspicion grew heavier, pressing against my chest, and I started to realize that the woman I had trusted completely might be systematically draining the life I had built. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the dim living room lights, wondering just how deep the betrayal went, and I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. I finally confronted her the next evening, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands were trembling. "I saw the withdrawals," I said quietly, sliding the printed statements across the kitchen table. "Can you explain this?" For a moment, she just stared at me, her face unreadable, like she was calculating the perfect story. Then she sighed dramatically, throwing her hands up. "You're acting like I'm some criminal," she snapped. "I'm just handling things differently. You don't need to control every little thing." Her words hit harder than I expected. I felt the familiar sting of guilt and self-doubt settle in, like I was the unreasonable one for even noticing. "This isn't control," I replied, trying to keep calm. "It's our money, our future. Why would you take that much without telling me?" Her eyes narrowed, and she leaned in close, whispering, "Why do you have to make everything about you? Can't I have some freedom?" I froze, the words twisting in my chest like a knife. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every corner of the apartment seemed heavier, darker, suffocating with tension. I replayed our years together, every small lie and deflection suddenly sharp and clear. Friends called to check in, and I laughed too loudly, hiding the storm raging inside. The more I tried to rationalize her behavior, the more the reality gnawed at me. She was deliberately keeping me in the dark while she spent what we'd worked for. I began documenting everything, messages, receipts, every odd transaction, because instinct told me I couldn't rely on trust anymore. The anger simmered quietly beneath the surface, mingled with fear and betrayal. I didn't say anything to her about it yet, pretending everything was fine while secretly building a case in my head. But every night I lay awake, the apartment silent except for the hum of the fridge, wondering how deep this deception went, and I feared I might not even recognize the full extent until it was too late. The midpoint of my nightmare hit one ordinary Tuesday, like a lightning strike I didn't see coming. I was checking our accounts again, just routine at this point, when I noticed something impossible, hundreds of transfers to an account I had never seen before. My stomach dropped. I called the bank to clarify, and the truth landed like a freight train. She had been siphoning tens of thousands from our savings into a separate account, completely hidden from me. Everything I thought I knew about our partnership was a lie. I sat in the empty apartment, staring at my laptop, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The life I had worked so hard to build, the future we had promised each other, had been quietly dismantled under my nose. I couldn't even speak when she came into the room. "What's wrong?" she asked, casual, sipping her wine. I closed the laptop slowly, trying to steady my voice. "I know about the other account." Her face went pale for the briefest moment, then she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that made my blood run cold. "You're overreacting," she said, shrugging as if this was normal behavior, something I should have expected. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she admitted the truth, but something inside me snapped differently this time. Instead of anger, I felt icy clarity. Every transaction, every lie, every carefully crafted story she told was now evidence. I realized I couldn't trust her with anything, not my money, my life, or my heart. I spent the next few hours in a daze, documenting every transfer, printing every statement, taking screenshots of every conversation. The apartment felt alien, walls closing in, every familiar corner now tainted by betrayal. The woman I married, the person I had trusted fully, was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. And the worst part? I realized this was only the beginning of the storm I was about to face. I sank into the couch, staring at the dim light above, asking myself for the first time, how do I even begin to fix this? After the discovery, I couldn't breathe the same way. Every corner of our apartment felt like it was closing in on me, every sound amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, even the rustle of her papers on the desk. I knew I had to act, but I had to act carefully. Any rash move could tip her off, and then everything would be gone, my money, my assets, maybe even the leverage I still had. I started consulting a lawyer discreetly, under the guise of financial planning. Sitting in that office, flipping through documents I barely understood, I realized how much I had underestimated the seriousness of her deception. She hadn't just drained our savings, she had been quietly undermining my entire financial foundation. Every word from the lawyer was a cold reassurance. I could secure my assets, protect myself legally, and even make sure she couldn't touch a dime without the court's intervention. At home, I maintained a calm facade. I laughed at her jokes, nodded along when she complained about her day, and even helped with household chores, all while secretly compiling evidence, bank statements, screenshots, emails, and receipts. Every night, I stayed up, meticulously organizing it like a puzzle, plotting my moves as if I were preparing for a battle I couldn't afford to lose. The psychological weight was enormous, but strangely empowering. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. The anger and betrayal that had been suffocating me were now tools. I just had to be patient, precise, and careful. But even as I meticulously planned, the tension at home grew. Her casual demeanor was unnerving, she didn't suspect a thing, laughing in the very rooms where she had been quietly stealing from me. Every laugh, every smile, every "we're in this together" whispered lie, made the upcoming confrontation feel both inevitable and terrifying. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the air conditioner in the background, asking myself silently, how far will I let this go before it's too late to stop her? Even with the plan forming in my head, the emotional weight hit me harder than I expected. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the apartment itself was suffocating me. Every shadow seemed heavier, every familiar sound warped into a reminder of betrayal, the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, even the soft creak of the floorboards felt like accusations. I kept replaying every moment, every word, every laugh, realizing how carefully she had manipulated me for months, maybe years. The person I loved, the person I had trusted completely, had been dismantling my life piece by piece. I started withdrawing from friends, avoiding calls and messages. "You've been quiet lately," one friend said over the phone. I forced a laugh. "Just tired, that's all." But inside, I was unraveling. I felt humiliated, powerless, and utterly alone. Nights blurred into days as I obsessed over the numbers, the lies, the transfers, and the endless what-ifs. My stomach knotted constantly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed somehow, for trusting, for loving, for believing in us. She noticed the change but only used it against me. "You're overreacting," she said one evening, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "You're letting stress make you paranoid." Her words, meant to placate, hit me differently now. They felt like nails driving into my chest. I wanted to scream, to collapse, to rage, but instead, I sat in silence, feeling smaller than I had in years. I remember staring at our bedroom window that night, city lights flickering in the distance, wondering how I had ended up here. All the stability, all the trust, all the planning for the future, gone. And the worst part? I knew this was only the beginning. The betrayal had layers I hadn't even uncovered yet, and I felt like I was standing at the bottom of a very deep, very dark pit. I whispered to myself, almost hoping someone would hear, how do I climb out of this without losing everything? By the next week, I realized I couldn't stay in this mess passively anymore. I started gathering evidence, every receipt, every screenshot, every bank statement, every message she'd ever sent about finances or plans. I opened a separate, secure email account just to store this, printing out copies and organizing them like a dossier. Every time I added a new piece of proof, I felt a flicker of control, like I was slowly reclaiming pieces of my life. I also discreetly reached out to friends who had noticed small changes before, people who had once shrugged off my concerns. One of them had seen her bragging about handling things that didn't add up, and another had caught her lying about expenses that now lined up perfectly with missing funds. Talking to them, even privately, gave me clarity and a sense of solidarity. I realized I wasn't as alone as I'd felt. At home, I kept up appearances flawlessly. I smiled, I cooked dinner, I laughed at her stories, pretending nothing was wrong while the evidence stacked quietly on my laptop. The apartment felt like a stage, and I was playing the role of the trusting husband while secretly plotting my next move. Every joke she made, every casual comment about money, felt like a confirmation that she underestimated me, and that mistake would cost her. Evenings became a mix of careful observation and meticulous record-keeping. I'd watch her, noting patterns, cross-checking statements, and anticipating her moves. The tension in the apartment was thick, but now it was my tension, not hers. For the first time in weeks, I felt the raw spark of empowerment. I knew that when the time came, I would strike with precision, and nothing she had done would protect her. That night, I sat by the window, city lights blurring in my vision, whispering to myself, she thinks she's in control, but she has no idea what I'm capable of. The day I filed for divorce, the air felt charged, almost electric, like the calm before a storm. I walked into the lawyer's office with the dossier I had meticulously prepared, every transaction, every message, every lie laid out in cold, undeniable detail. My hands were steady, my heart pounding, but inside I felt a mix of anticipation and vindication. The lawyer nodded, flipping through the pages, and said, with this evidence, she won't touch a dime. Hearing that made the months of fear and sleepless nights finally worth it. At home, I kept my demeanor calm. I greeted her with a smile, kissed her on the cheek, and acted like nothing had changed. But she was starting to sense something. "Why are you so normal?" she asked one evening, a faint edge of suspicion creeping into her voice. I shrugged lightly. "I've been tired. Work's been exhausting," I said, masking the thrill of knowing I held the upper hand. The court froze her access to joint accounts immediately, and I began moving assets into accounts she could never touch. Every step was precise, calculated, and irreversible. I watched her expression shift from casual indifference to unease as she realized the control she thought she had was slipping away. She tried to argue, to manipulate, to charm her way out, but the evidence was airtight. I stayed silent, letting the truth speak louder than any words could. For the first time in months, the tension in the apartment changed. It was no longer suffocating, it was electric, almost like a warning. Every laugh she gave, every attempt to charm or distract me, only highlighted her growing panic. She had no idea I was waiting for the right moment to secure everything. And deep down, I knew that moment was just the beginning of her reckoning. That night, as I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, I whispered to myself, she's about to realize exactly what she's done, and it's going to hurt more than she ever imagined. Almost immediately, I started seeing the consequences of her actions unfold. She no longer had access to our joint accounts, and her attempts to maintain the lifestyle she had taken for granted began to crumble. I watched, quietly, as the confidence she once carried effortlessly started to falter. One evening, she came to me, trying to charm her way into a conversation. "Can't we just figure this out?" she asked, her voice unusually soft. I looked at her, calmly, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. Her face, once animated and confident, now carried the strain of panic and disbelief. Friends who had once envied our marriage started noticing the tension, whispering behind her back. I overheard a few messages she sent, frantically trying to secure help from people who had nothing to do with our finances. It was surreal, seeing the woman I had loved for years reduced to scrambling, realizing that every manipulation, every lie, every hidden transfer had consequences she hadn't anticipated. I stayed composed, never raising my voice, never showing satisfaction outright. But inside, there was a quiet, burning satisfaction, the kind that comes from finally seeing justice delivered after months of betrayal. The apartment, once filled with her laughter and false assurances, now held a tense quiet that mirrored the shift in power. Every glance she shot me was laced with anxiety, and every word she spoke carried hesitation. The realization hit her like a physical blow, the life she had assumed was untouchable was slipping through her fingers. Her lavish spending, her casual manipulation, her hidden accounts, it all meant nothing now. I finally understood the power of patience, of preparation, and of staying calm while the other person thought they were in control. And the best part? She had no idea how much control I still had. That night, as the city lights flickered through the windows, I whispered silently to myself, she's starting to feel the weight of her own choices, and it's only going to get heavier. The courtroom felt surreal, like a stage where years of manipulation and betrayal would finally meet justice. I walked in carrying my carefully prepared evidence, each document a testament to the lies, the hidden transfers, the months of planning she thought she had outsmarted me with. She sat across from me, trying to appear confident, but her eyes flickered nervously to the pile of statements and screenshots I had laid out. Every glance she threw my way was met with a calm, unwavering stare. I felt steady for the first time in months, the kind of calm that comes from knowing the outcome is inevitable. The judge reviewed the evidence, flipping through pages of transactions and messages. My heart pounded, but I stayed focused, letting the proof speak louder than my voice ever could. Everything has been documented, my lawyer said clearly. The accounts, the transfers, and all communications are verifiable. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, realizing that her charm and lies held no weight here. I watched as her composure crumbled, the same woman who once manipulated me now facing the full consequences of her actions. When the ruling came down, it was precise and devastating. All assets remained secured under my name, her access was cut completely, and she was left with minimal support. I felt a cold, quiet satisfaction, the kind that doesn't shout but resonates deeply within. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. Watching her scramble, humbled and regretful, was the purest form of vindication. She had underestimated me for years, and that mistake had cost her everything she tried to take. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The tension, the fear, the anger, it all began to dissipate, replaced with clarity and empowerment. I realized that patience, strategy, and composure could turn betrayal into triumph. And deep down, I knew she would carry this lesson with her forever, the sting of realizing that the person she tried to deceive was far stronger than she ever imagined. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I whispered to myself, I'm finally free, and she's the one left to face the consequences of her choices. The weeks after the divorce were strange, quiet, almost peaceful. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I moved my remaining assets into secure accounts, restructured my finances, and finally allowed myself to look ahead instead of constantly over my shoulder. The apartment felt lighter, the air clearer, and even mundane sounds, the fridge humming, the wind against the window, no longer carried that suffocating tension. I began rebuilding routines that had fallen apart under months of stress. I cooked meals without thinking twice, spent weekends with friends who had stayed quietly supportive, and even started exploring hobbies I had neglected. Emotional scars remained, of course, but they no longer dictated my life. I reflected on the past, the trust one had given freely, the manipulation I endured, and the patience it took to reclaim what was mine. Every step of that painful journey had shaped me, and the lessons were indelibly etched into my understanding of loyalty, boundaries, and self-respect. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of her in my social circles or through mutual acquaintances, the woman who had once seemed untouchable now humbled and cautious. She was facing the consequences of every lie and hidden transfer, forced to reckon with the damage she caused. I felt no gloating, just a quiet satisfaction that justice, in its own way, had been served. At night, I would sit by the window, city lights blurring in the darkness, and breathe. I thought about the life I wanted to build from here, one grounded in honesty, stability, and self-respect. I whispered to myself, I'm free, I'm stronger, and nothing she did can take that away. For the first time, I felt complete closure, a sense of empowerment that came not from revenge alone, but from reclaiming my life, my assets, and my peace of mind. And somewhere deep down, I knew she would carry the weight of regret forever, while I finally moved forward unbroken.